Hello, and welcome to Dyslexia Devoted, the podcast dedicated to building awareness, understanding, and strategies to help those with dyslexia. I'm your host, Lisa Parnello, dyslexia therapist and founder of Parnello Education Services. Join me as we dive into today's episode of Dyslexia Devoted. Hello, and welcome back, or welcome to your very first episode of Dyslexia Devoted. Today, for episode 115, we are talking about math. So, you might be wondering, hey, this is a dyslexia podcast. Isn't dyslexia all about reading? Well, yes, but it's more than that. So much more than that. And as I've been reminded by not one, not two, but at least 5 of my students, dyslexia can also affect math. It is the middle/end of September as I'm recording this, and it is when the honeymoon period of the start of the school year has officially worn off and the real stuff has set in. And I have had so many of my kids suddenly struggling with math. Kids who have never really had a major struggle, or struggles that we thought we had overcome last year, have come rearing their ugly heads. So I wanted to talk about how dyslexia affects math. Before we jump all the way in, I wanted to say a big thank you to all of you who came to the Back to School Workshop series. So those 3 workshops were kind of an experiment on my end to see how much you guys would like live workshops. I know I cannot do them all the time because I have a full caseload, probably an overfull caseload of kids that I work with all the time, but it is something I genuinely enjoy doing. So don't worry, there'll be a few more workshops, including at least one free one in October for Dyslexia Awareness Month. So I'm still working out the details of how and when those are all going to be, because I'll be honest, I'm a little tired. So October will have at least one free workshop, and I'll probably do one more live one of the Dyslexia for Beginners, because that was a huge hit. And I would love nothing more than to make October all about dyslexia awareness. So for today, let's focus on math, because we're going to probably do more on reading next month. And math is the high point, well, maybe low point, for this school year so far for so many kids. Let's break down why math is hard for kids with dyslexia, because there's a couple different reasons. First of all, we have to read for everything. When you have math class, there's a lot of written directions that you have to read. And so that makes it so that even if you were good at math, now all of a sudden your page is full of reading, and now you don't feel so good at it anymore. Or if you can't even read the directions, how are you supposed to complete the task correctly? And there's been a lot of shift into Common Core math to get kids to better understand math, not just memorize equations, but actually understand the gravity of numbers and how they work. And I get that. But at the same time, it is my worst nightmare as a dyslexia therapist, because all these kids who used to be good at math are suddenly bad at it because it brought in so much reading and they need help on every single problem. One of the kids has been bursting into tears over his math homework this year. And there's been multiple messages with me and mom trying to help him through it. But he brought in his homework the other day and I was like, geez, no wonder he's freaking out. His entire page is words. He's a kid with dyslexia, and math was never really a strong subject, but he could do it. And now the entire page is full of words. And so now he can't feel like he can do anything, because dyslexia is a language-based learning difference. So it's not actually just reading the words, because this kid can read now. I've taught him to read. He can read things. But once you start bringing in all of this language, it's too many words, and it starts bringing in a whole language of its own into this class. So while we always think about math being numbers, there's a whole language behind it as well. There's a whole set of vocabulary. There's a whole set of syntax, like word order of how you say things. So when you are reading a math word problem, those words mean things, and where they put the words mean things. And for example, the word is often means equals when you have a math word problem. And if you don't teach a kid that is means equals, they're not going to just figure that out on their own. So, for example, 27 is 3 times a number, means 27 equals 3x. And then there's the x. The kid's like, wait a minute, there's letters. Why are there letters in my math problem? Why is there letters here? I don't like letters. We're not friends. And that in and of itself freaks them out as soon as they start seeing letters brought into math equations. So that becomes 2 separate issues. There's one, that they have to be able to read the problems and understand them in just terms of basic sentence reading. And then they also have to understand the language piece or the vocabulary piece of math, because math has its own language, its own vocabulary, its own spelling, like the word sum is magically spelled differently when you refer to math versus I have some chocolates. Being able to do those two things are separate problems. Sometimes kids can't read the problem, and sometimes kids can read it, but they can't understand it. And then we have the third issue when it comes to dyslexia, which is remembering math facts. And this is one of those things that people don't even realize is an issue. But the same thing that makes it hard for kids to remember the decoding skills and the sounds for the letters and things like that is that rapid memory recall. And even if they know their math facts, it doesn't come easily to them. They have to work a lot harder. It takes a lot longer because their brain takes a longer pathway to retrieve that information. I can't even tell you the number of times families will say, my kid is really struggling with math facts. And I said, yes, that's because of dyslexia. And they go, wait, what? It is? I had no idea. Because everybody always thinks that dyslexia is seeing letters backwards, which it is not. I'm not even going on that tangent yet right now. And we want to make sure that people understand that dyslexia is so much more than letters. It's a whole way a brain works. It's a different way of thinking. And that does not make it bad or wrong. It's just a different way of doing things. And so many people don't know the connections between dyslexia and the different aspects it can take in different areas. We always think about it in reading, and sometimes people think about it when it comes to writing and spelling. But most of the time, we don't think about it when kids are in other subject areas. And it can affect the entire day for a child. So how can we support students in this area? If math is a struggle, what can we do? So there's a few different things we could do. One is we can read the problems to them, because if the child is struggling in reading, maybe making them read the words to the math problem is probably not the nicest thing to do to them. If they can't read those level of words in reading class, what are the odds they can read it during math class? So read the problems to them if you can. Another thing is teaching them the language of math. How many more than? More usually means adding, but how many more than usually means subtraction. Like, how many more pencils are there than crayons? That's actually a subtraction problem. It's not an addition problem. And kids will just see more and think they must add. So we can teach the kids the vocabulary around math, because a lot of times when we have a math problem, it's actually pretty clear what you have to write down, but somebody has to tell you the secret code of which words mean which mathematical symbols. And then there's math facts, which are the bane of most kids' existence. I have a favorite app, which is called Quick Math, because it's very tactile and the kids can draw the numbers on the screen and they get rewarded for how quickly they do the correct answer. Not just how quick they go, because some kids will go really fast and screw up a lot and just guess, but it forces them to draw the number shapes accurately, and it forces them to get the correct answer or they get punished. And not like mean punished, but like it doesn't help their score. And it's one where they can get better and better, and their job is to get faster while still staying accurate. So I'll link that in the show notes where you guys are listening to this. By the way, if you ever want the show notes and things I talk about, it is always at parnelloeducation.com/episode, like the word episode, and then the number of whichever episode you're on. So in this case, it would be parnelloeducation.com/episode 115 for 115 for today's episode. Okay, I have to start wrapping it up because I'm actually recording this before my first child of the day. So let's recap where we are at for today's episode. First, we talked about how dyslexia is far more than just reading and writing. It affects math. How does it affect math? First, they have to read a lot. So many math problems these days are covered in words. All over the page is tons of words. And there's that problem right there. And we also have the fact that the math has its own language. Words mean and represent different things in math terminology compared to regular terminology. And then we also talked about math facts, because it is often very difficult for kids with dyslexia to learn their math facts. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier, but let's just toss it in right now, is that math equations also have an order or a sequence of the steps you're supposed to do when you solve an equation. And sequencing is also hard for kids with dyslexia. So that is another wrench that gets thrown into the mix. So some of the things that you can do to help kids is to read the questions to them if they can't read them. You can teach them the language of math and what certain phrases mean within a math problem. And you can practice math facts more frequently because it is really challenging for kids with dyslexia to remember them. So my favorite app is called Quick Math, and it's on the iPad because it requires tactile and it makes them go faster while being accurate. All right, and I am out of here right now because it is time to start my happy day with adorable little children. And I hope you have a fantastic day. Stay tuned for Dyslexia Awareness Month coming in October and all the things I have planned for you. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you want to learn even more about dyslexia, check out parnelloeducation.com/courses. See you next time.